We are the 2020 Board of Equalization and Review for Union County. We have been appointed by the county commissioners to hear any and all taxpayers with respect to concerns, complaints regarding the evaluation of their property for tax purposes. Property owners appearing before the Board of Equalization and Review have the right to a fair and equitable hearing. The Board of Equalization and Review has been charged with ensuring that the proper legal principles have been applied in evaluation dispute for tax purposes. The format of the hearing is as follows. The clerk calls the case, locates the property, and explains the situation. The appellant presents his or her case. The assessor's office offers their defense. Both parties will be given the opportunity to rebut or conclude their testimony. Any questions from either party should be directed to the chairman. The board will rule on the case or table it and inform the taxpayers when it will be reopened. The taxpayers will be notified in writing of the board's decision. By statute, the burden of proof is on the taxpayer to demonstrate that the assessment is erroneous. Please silence your cell phones, and I would ask that the board, when you have questions to ask, please speak to the microphone, and the appellant the same. Any questions? All right. Angie, if you would.
And you got Charlotte Rifle and Pistol Club Inc.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Make sure can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, by way of introduction, my name is Larry Shaheen. I'm an attorney with the McIntosh Law Firm, and I'm here representing the Charlotte Rifle and Pistol Club today. And first off, I'd like to say that we don't have a complaint. It is a concern, but I have no complaints about the assessor's office. They've been marvelous to work with, and I really appreciate Mr. Scholar's work with me and the fact that it has been collaborative. Today we're here to talk about a property tax exempt status for an organization that has been in existence since 1917 in this area. And it's very important that when you look at that, I'm glad you talked about our burden. It's important that we have a conversation today about this organization and what it has done and what it means to this community and what its actual purpose is. Because we believe that when we are done today, we will have satisfied our burden, and we will have shown you that this organization is the model by which nonprofit gun membership at clubs should be modeled after. Now, in the Charlotte Rifle and Pistol Club confirmed their federal tax exempt status was received in February of 1951 from the IRS. Now, we have a letter in your packet. Now, actually, let me go back and make sure that you all understand exactly what you've got. I've got a copy here, but I want to make sure you all have it. In your binder today, we have a number of materials and evidence. We have a practitioner's brief, that is my brief, and at the end of that brief, we have an exhibit that specifically states and lays out the statute by which we are going to be asking for exemption, which is 105-287.7. We also have the Articles of Incorporation of the organization, the nonprofit filing, the nonprofit educational and charitable activity, the organization's bylaws, its tax exempt status letter, the 2018 tax return, its budget, and the employee information. Now, we'll be referencing some of that throughout, and we will have testimony from the Secretary, Mr. David Grimm, who's with us today. But I wanted to start off with saying that this original organization was founded in 1917 after the First World War. And the current Charlotte Rifle and Pistol Club is a properly organized Chapter 55A, North Carolina nonprofit corporation that was organized on January 30th, 1947. The organization has at no time ceased to operate and has operated in this manner since that time. As this organization was founded near the time of the conclusion of the First World War, the purpose was to educate and provide an area where individuals could freely practice their Second Amendment rights and be ready for the next time they were called upon to serve. These primary purposes of the organization are educational and charitable in nature and serve a benevolent purpose to assist in the education and promotion of firearm education, training, and use in the community. Now, from a 10,000-foot view, what does that mean? Well, let's look to the Articles of Incorporation purposes because we believe that that governs everything that this organization does. Number one, promote the practice. Now, when they say practice, that's education of rifle and pistol shooting in cooperation with the War Department under the direction of the Director of Civilian Marksmanship. That's not like what you see in most other private organizations. It's not to have fun. It's not to, hang around and joke. This organization was founded for the purposes of practicing an individual's Second Amendment rights and making sure that it was done safely and securely. Two, to offer basic firearm instruction to inductees of the armed services. Now, they still do. And you will see that several federal, local, and state organizations still participate at this organization for free. Unlike other gun organizations, there is no payment that comes to this organization from these local, state, and federal organizations. 3, to promote the sport of rifle and pistol shooting. And 4, to instruct boys and girls in the safety and use of small arms. Now, those are just the articles of incorporation. What about the bylaws, how by it is governed? Well, the purpose of this corporation shall be the encouragement of organized archery, rifle, pistol, and shotgun shooting among residents of the United States, with a view toward a better knowledge on the part of the residents of the safe handling and proper care of firearms, as well as the promotion of good marksmanship. Now, that's what this organization does. Now, of course, we have a burden to meet, so we're going to do our very best to make sure we do that. So for that, I'm going to call up the Secretary, Mr. David Grimm, and I'm going to ask him a few questions, and we would encourage you all to ask as many questions as you like. We want to make sure we're transparent throughout this process. But, David?
I'm going to cheat because senior moments become more frequent. So I have my written answers mostly written down.
Now, David, what is your name and address?
David Grimm, 3014 Chisholm Court, Waxhaw, North Carolina.
What is your position with the CRTC?
I'm the secretary of the board.
What are the duties and roles of that position?
Holy moly, I must maintain compliance with the Nonprofit Corporation Act of North Carolina and other corporate legal matters, keep a complete record of all meetings, serve notices of meetings, report to the board of directors, supervise and maintain the seal, corporate books, records, minutes, sign as secretary on contracts, notes, instruments, conduct all official correspondence, keep a proper and complete membership record, maintain a thorough and complete record of business of the club, maintain all login credentials, perform all other acts and duties usually performed by the secretary of a corporation, which is a lot more than they told me when I signed on.
How long have you held that position there?
I've been there since February of 2019.
As secretary, are you intimately familiar with all information relating to the finances and filings of the organization?
I am.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask that this gentleman be considered a truthful expert on these issues, just from their standpoint.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Now, David, can you tell us about your work there, all of what you do in terms of charitable and nonprofit work with the CRPC, as well as a little bit about the organization from a
Well,
historical perspective?
all of our work is nonprofit because no one gets paid. We have some maintenance workers at the shotgun that load the targets into the traps that throw the targets up in the air because we can't allow volunteers to do that. If one of them were to get hit with the machinery when they're loading it or something, our insurance wouldn't cover that. By the way, we have a lot of insurance. The state of North Carolina requires gun clubs to have $750,000 worth of insurance. We have $10 million worth of liability insurance. We're not taking any chances. We're all about safety and doing things right. So everything we do, we have a lot of programs that we offer to the general public. Women on Target. We invite ladies to sign up. They come in 2 or 3 times a year. We have an instructor for each lady. We don't let them do anything on their own. And they go through rifle, pistol, and shotgun shooting. And we have a luncheon for them, and they go home happy. And the next time we have it, their friends come, their sisters. That's a very, very popular program. We have a handgun familiarization program that we have once a month, and it's always filled. We limit it, I think, to 20, might be less. Again, 1 instructor per person, all volunteer instructors. We do charge them a fee because we provide ammunition, targets, and that covers the cost of that. But there's no profit involved in that. Rifle familiarization, we have a shotgun certification. The Boy Scouts come. They can earn merit badges. We have several times a year, we'll have what they call a fun shoot. Different troops in the area will bring their kids up. Again, there's a certified instructor for just about every kid. And there's a guy standing next to them as they shoot, so it's very safe. Schools, other things we have, and almost everything is available to the public. Some things you have to be a member to be able to take advantage of. And we are a members-only club, other than those things that we do outside for the general public, because if you go to a public range, a municipal range, or a private shooting range, you show up with a gun, they give you a spot, you go out and shoot. We don't do that. We want our members to be responsible. To join, anybody can join our club. All of you, anybody. We don't turn anyone away. I think you just have to be a resident of the United States. Once you've joined the club, we make you qualify before you're allowed to shoot by yourself, pistol, rifle, shotgun. And we have a program. It usually involves a classroom and then a practical where you have to show that you are proficient in the use of your firearm. And then on your badge, we give you qualification. We have range safety officers available every day, 2 at every range, and they would look at your badge to see if you're allowed to go shoot on the pistol range. If you don't have a P on your badge, you can't shoot without someone being there with you. At public ranges, you don't have these safety features. The guy next to you could be a nut job. So we require a background check when you join. And to my knowledge, I've been in the club 5 years. We haven't had anyone turned away. There's been a couple of questionable background checks, but the board reviews those, and if it's something that's really not applicable to our use, we usually let the member join. So it's not a big problem for us.
David, really quickly, I've got up here some charitable and educational work. Can you real quick go through this list?
Sure. Appleseed Program. This is a federally, a national program. It's approved by the NRA. And it is designed to bring young people, it's for you, they bring them into the full history of the country. Back in the 1700s, they start with muskets, then they bring them into more modern firearms. Again, 1 instructor per child, and they...
Beg your pardon, sir. I'm going to take.
Sorry, we just completely lost.
Okay. I'm sorry,
We're
sir.
back?
Not yet. No, hang on.
Okay.
We lost the recording capability.
Who?
Good.
We're good, ma'am.
Good, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry for the
That's
interruption.
okay.
Continue on.
Anyway, it's a youth organization, promote firearm safety among children. Boy Scouts. It's not called the Boy Scouts anymore, it's just Scouts. There's girls involved now. We bring them in, again, very supervised, a couple times a year. They can get merit badges. I believe there's a rifle shooting merit badge and a shotgun merit badge. Again, one-on-one, we provide the instructors. We don't charge them anything for that. Women on Target, a great, very, very popular thing for women, any women of any age. We don't let anyone under 14 shoot alone. So 14 and up, we get 70-year-old women, 65-year-old women. It's a great thing. American Legion, we host several turkey shoots a couple times a year. We give them a portion of the range. We supervise it. Members of the public come in. They shoot at little targets. They win a turkey, a roast beef, different things. They don't give away money. They just give away food. Junior Air Rifle League. This is pretty interesting. Anybody under 18 can join our Junior Air Rifle League. It's once a week, Friday nights at our indoor range. Again, very heavily supervised by volunteers. There's no charge to the kids or their parents. We have a young lady who is such a great shooter. She is on her way to the Olympics. And we gave her some money earlier this year to help her, because it's expensive. She has a coach and she has to go, there's entrance fees and things, so we gave her some money to help her along. She's really a fine young lady. Amateur Trap Association. We host trap shooting contests open to the general public. Skeet shooting, we open our skeet shooting facilities to the general public if they're a member of the Skeet Shooting Association. And Department of Homeland Security. This is a group of air marshals at the airport. They come out often. When they at least once a week, sometimes 4 times a week, in their periods of activation. They have sometimes we won't see them for a month, then we'll see them 4 days a week. Again, we supervise it, but they do their own thing. We give them the private, we cordon off a portion of the range so they can shoot whatever they have to shoot. They are very good shooters, I will tell you that. Again, no cost. We have letters from them attesting that we allow them. Waxhaw Police Department's there every week. Sometimes they'll do, if they're doing a qualification, they'll be there 4 days a week, different times. We allow them to shoot at night. They have, part of their protocol is to be able to shoot with night sights and things. We supervise them. Normally our range closes at 8. Sometimes we'll let them go longer because they need to be in the dark, and that's fine with us. Pineville Police come, Union County Sheriffs come, Charlotte Macon. If they show up in a police car, we generally give them a section of the range. A few months ago, a sheriff came. He said, I got a sight in the captain's rifle. Can I use it? There you go. Take bench number 30. All of these are supervised by us. We don't just let anyone on our range without being under the auspices of a range safety officer, of which we have about 130, all volunteers. No one gets paid. So those are just some of the things we do. Handgun familiarization, I spoke about, that's once a month. Handgun permit classes, we offer these occasionally when the demand comes. It's the same class that you would go to a commercial range and pay $150 to get your training for your permit. We offer them for like $65. The money for that is strictly to pay the instructor. These instructors for that get payment. The club makes nothing. NRA safety classes, we have lots. Don't be a victim, gun storage safety, self-defense classes for women. Popular, offered when they can. Once in a while, there is a cost for the instructor, and there'll be a small cost to the student, but most of the time they're free. NRA qualification classes, basic pistol, basic rifle, basic shotgun. We offer all these classes. Again, the only payment is to the instructor, not to the club. We offer our facilities for free. Red Cross, we have 3 or 4 times a year. We offer first aid classes, and our club pays for those because a lot of the members take those. All the RSOs have to take those courses, so the club picks up the cost of that. And then about 4 times a year, we run hunter safety courses, and there's no cost for that to anyone. Mostly it's non-club members. Most of our club members that hunt don't need a hunter safety course, but we get a lot of civilians that come in, and that's run by the state. We don't, they use their own instructors. They have guys, they put on the whole presentation. We just let them use our facility. Waxhaw PD, Federal Air Marshals, 8 days in February and once a week in 2019. Again, miscellaneous PD, unannounced. Once they come, they're allowed to shoot. Women on Target, Junior Air Rifle, every Friday. Appleseed is 4 times a year. Boy Scouts 2 to 4 times a year. We have about 4 archery tournaments per year. I could not believe how popular archery is. I'm not an archery guy. I don't own a bow and arrow. And I thought our gun range would foster the most. Man, they have an archery tournament, 100 people show up, kids, wives, you name it, and we have a fantastic archery facility. We have 132 acres. Most of it's undeveloped. It's all berms pushed up, but we have a great wooded area, and they like it because we have these 3-dimensional targets. You know, it looks like a real bear or deer, and they go from station to station through the woods. And very, very popular, hard to believe. Red Cross training, hunter safety courses 2 to 4 times a year, Mare Legion turkey shoot 2 to 4 times a year, rifle familiarization 10 times a year, handgun familiarization 10 times a year, shotgun safety 6 times per year, matches 2 to 6 per week, mostly on weekends. We do get some older groups that like to have a match in the middle of the week, but most people work, so the matches are on the weekend. NRA training, we average about 1 a month. And a prospective member orientation, we have that 10 times a year. If you want to join our club, we invite you to an orientation where we give you a dog and pony show and tell you what everything is, how much it costs, what we offer. We offer a lot for what you pay, I gotta be honest.
All right, so clearly, your organization does so much with so very little. Can you tell us about what other gun ranges are costing in the marketplace? I mean,
Sure.
the fact that you're able to offer such a fantastic service for such a low price. I mean, can you talk about how much more expensive it is for all these other ranges in the area?
Well, we charge $240 a year. For that, you get a complete shotgun range, 2 trap fields, 2 skeet fields, a 5-stand, which is similar to sporting clays, 2 practice fields, all at your disposal. The only cost is for targets, when you're a member. We have a 26-stage pistol range on our outdoor range. I think we have 30 positions for the rifle range. We have 2 plinking ranges, parents come with their kids and they shoot 22s at little squirrels and steel targets that we have out there. They love that. We also have a complete action shooting facility, which is very popular. We have 3 action shooting bays. Action shooting has become the #1 firearm sport in the country. It's similar to police-style shooting, where you shoot through barricades, maybe through a window, an open door, at specific targets. We have at least 1 match a month for those. And again, the person shooting is accompanied by a range safety officer at all times. So it's not people just running around shooting.
And everywhere else in the area in terms of what you get?
So that's 204. Oh, and we have an indoor range, open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in Matthews, which is extremely popular, especially if you live on that side of town. Ranges, nearby ranges charge anywhere from $300 to $500 a year to be a member. We mostly have indoor ranges nearby. You have to drive a fair bit to get to an outdoor range. The outdoor ranges that are an hour away, an hour and a half away, are usually public ranges, cost you a couple $100 a year to be a member, but they only offer rifle shooting or pistol shooting. There's no determination. They might have 8 or 10 spots to shoot from. The other ones are indoor ranges. We have a lot of indoor ranges around. You can either pay by the hour, I don't know, it probably averages $20 an hour for you to go in and shoot, or you can get a family membership for anywhere from $300 to $500 a year, which allows you and your family usually to go there and shoot if there's a lane available. Most of them have about 20 spots for shooters. We have 100 spots for shooters, so we don't usually have a problem with a crowd. So for $240 a year, you get an indoor range, an outdoor range, and a shotgun range, and that's all you pay. The indoor range, you don't pay. You just bring your own stuff and shoot at will.
Mr. Grimm, do you feel the costs are lower because of the fact that there are charitable donations from the membership to the club every year? Is that why you're able to offer all of these services?
We have a lot of members. We have almost 2,000 members. We have about 1,500 regular old members. We have 144 senior members. When you're a member of our club for 5 years and you reach the age of 65, you pay $120 in dues. We reduce it by half. We have 135 family members who don't pay anything. They come in on their family with the one main member, and we have quite a few junior members. We have lots of junior members, so if you wanted your grandson or your son to be able to shoot with you or to learn about shooting, we give them a badge for $10. That's what we charge. So because we have a pretty large constituency of members, we keep the prices low. We had talked about raising dues last year. Some wanted to go to what the commercial ranges charge. We should be getting $300, $400 a month. And in the end, we decided we've got money left over at the end of the year for major projects. We're always rebuilding something. Our road washed out last month, cost us 10 grand. So we decided these are our members and our friends. We're not raising the dues prices. And I would tell you that if we do win here today, and I hope that we do, we would lower I would vote to lower our dues, because we simply don't need that much money. And that's where I believe the money should go. Any savings that the club gets should go back to its members. And again, anyone can become a member. We just have requirements that make sure that you are a safe and accurate shooter. We don't allow just anybody to drive in and start shooting.
So would you say that the closest example to your organization, you're like the YMCA, correct?
Maybe the American Legion or the VFW, something like that, yeah.
And if your activity took place within either of those organizations, you would expect that to be exempt, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Now, are you familiar with the facts and circumstances surrounding the denial of the nonprofit exemption for the Charlotte Rifle and Pistol Club?
I am.
Okay, can you tell us how that occurred?
It occurred because I'm lazy. And I got these letters from the county that said, you have not reported your personal business tax. And it was due in January, I think. And now it's February, and I got these letters because I had just become secretary. And I'm like, boy, this is a lot of work, because I looked at it and I thought I had to fill out every piece of equipment that we had on there. So I wrote a letter to you guys, and I said, we're a tax exempt organization. Do we have to pay these taxes? And a nice lady got back to me and said, do you have your certifications? I said, which ones? Well, the 55A from the state and the IRS determination letter. Well, I went through every piece of paper that I had been given by the old secretary. And as you can imagine, volunteer groups, we change secretaries now and then, and things fall through the cracks. I couldn't find it. But I called, got them both, mailed them to her, and she was kind enough to send me an email back that your taxes have been eliminated and you don't have to file again. I thought, that's great. That's how it should be. Why didn't we do this 30 years ago or 50 years ago? No one has an answer for that. I've talked to some of the old secretaries that are still alive. No, it's like, what? They don't. So then I said, well, how about our property taxes? What if we don't have to pay business personal property tax? We shouldn't have to pay property taxes. And she said, that's not my department. And she handed me to another gentleman who called me back and said, absolutely not. Gun clubs are not tax exempt. And I said, that just doesn't sit right with me. We've got a tax. The government says the federal government says we are tax exempt. The state of North Carolina says we are tax exempt. What do we do that we're not tax exempt? And this is where we landed. So here we are.
Were you surprised that you were denied?
Yeah, I was. We had the paperwork.
Now tell me why you feel you all in your organization qualify for this exemption.
We listed most of them before, but we're all volunteers. No one gets paid. There's really no profit to be made. No one profits from this. The money that we get from our membership donations and dues and from match events and other things there, we get a piddlings, all go back into the maintenance of our range. And I can tell you we have a pretty fair, it sounds easy, but we have 132 acres up there. Our indoor range is a money pit, needed a roof. We're just in the midst of replacing the bullet traps and the overhead target carriers, because our old traps were from the 1970s. They were steel, and when the bullets hit them, it puts lead in the air, lead on the ground. We would have to have lead remediation. We had to have lead testing done twice, 3 times a year at about $6 grand a pop, so it was very expensive. We're spending almost $200,000 to improve our facility for the safety of the members mostly. The new bullet traps, you shoot into this chopped up tires, basically. No lead gets dispersed, and you can recycle the lead. And we just felt that was a benefit all around, and in 10 years it'll probably pay for itself, but that's 200 grand. We are surrounded by homes. We have a 300-yard range. We'll go another 300-yard range, and you've got Anklin Forest, which is $500,000 homes, and people who don't like to be annoyed with bullets whizzing by. So we installed, in 2017, we installed at the cost of $250,000, a barricade across our outdoor rifle range. And we're in the process of doing it for some of our other ranges. So that's a giant expense. The action shooting facility, to maintain that, it cost us almost $200,000 about 2 years ago. It started to erode. We found that the contractor hadn't done some things. So our range, roads, we have about 2 miles of roads and parking lot. Incredible. I never realized how much gravel roads take to keep keep up. We don't have fancy buildings, we're not a country club, we don't have a pool, we don't have a tennis court, none of that. We've got a few block buildings. Each of our ranges has a meeting room, classroom facility, 2 bathrooms, and a little bitty office for storage and for where the RSOs can go to look on the computer to check someone's membership or something. And that's it. I mean, everything else is just storage. We own a tractor and a bunch of lawn mowing machinery. But other than that, we're pretty much just a big old pit. All our berms were pushed up in the early 60s, but with Army Corps of Engineer equipment, they would shoot at our range, and the Navy would shoot at our range back then. They didn't have their own facilities. And so one summer, they left bulldozers and other things there, and they said, we can't do the work, but we're going to leave them here for the summer. And our members took that equipment and pushed up all the berms, and that's what you see today. We've had to replenish it. Last year, we took lead out of the berms as a safety precaution. It cost $37,000, but we recovered 55,000 pounds of lead. So you can imagine how much that 40 years of shooting has put into those berms. So it's not cheap to run our place, and we try to keep it first class. We don't have any falling down shacks or anything, but it's not a fancy country club or anything. Most of our members are just blue-collar guys like me. We do have doctors and lawyers and educators and other people, absolutely, but to me, they're all just regular people, you know. We all get along just fine.
Last question, Mr. Grimm. Would you feel that any of this would be possible without your tax exempt status?
No,
Thank you, sir.
no.
Thank you. Very quickly, I'm going to finish up here from our perspective. Thank you very much, Mr. Grimm. I know that Mr. Scholar is going to do a...
You'd like me to direct my questions at him now, right?
Oh, after, whatever you'd like to do. Yeah.
It's up to you, Mr. Chairman. I have some questions for Mr. Grimm.
Let's hear them out, then we'll.
Yes, sir. Okay, so, as you've heard, this organization does an immense amount of good, an unbelievable amount in the community. And it has a long-standing history of doing so. It is not new. And the purpose of the tax exempt status, the purpose of the tax giving back and letting these folks have this opportunity is so that organizations like this can exist. There is no organization like this anywhere that I can imagine. And when they asked me to come and work with them, folks, I'll tell you, I'm doing this at a discount because I believe in what they do. Now, let's talk about statutory guidance. Section 105-278.7 provides a 2-part test for personal and ad valorem property tax exemption, which emerges from this statute. Now, I know that Mr. Scholar is going to have something to say about the wholly and exclusively used section, but let's remember, we have to determine exactly how we define a nonprofit. In North Carolina, there is no definition in section 105-278.7. There is a definition in section 105, and we have to turn to chapter 55A for that definition. The definition of a nonprofit corporation means a corporation intended to have no income, or intended to have income none of which is distributable to its members, directors, or officers, except as permitted by Article 13 of this chapter, and includes all associations without capital stock formed under subchapter 5 of chapter 54 of the general statutes or under any act or acts placed thereby. That's them. And their donations, their membership fees, are donations. They are not fees. These members pay donations every single year to pay for all of this, much like the YMCA and the American Legion and Rotary and the Masons and many other tax-exempt organizations. They very clearly fall under this statute. But let's look to subsection C, which is the first part of the test. Subsection C, the following agencies, when the other requirements of this section are met, may obtain property tax exemption under this section. Let's look to where they would fall. A charitable association or institution, 1, check. A benevolent association or institution, check. A nonprofit, community, or neighborhood organization, check. There's 3 of them right there. Now, when you look to subsection F within the meaning of this section as to whether or not they qualify, we have 5 possible opportunities, of which they qualify for 3. Number 1, educational purpose is one that has as its objective the education or instruction of human beings. It comprehends the transmission of information and the training or development of the knowledge and skills of individual and persons. Number 4, a charitable purpose is one that has humane or philanthropic objectives. It is an activity that benefits humanity or a significant rather than limited segment of the community without exception or pecuniary profit or reward. The safe training and exercise of your Second Amendment rights is in no way a limited segment of this population. It benefits all of us, every single one of us. Number 5, a cultural purpose is one that is conducive to the enlightenment and refinement of taste acquired through intellectual and aesthetic training, education, and discipline. That's them. But let's not only rely on statute. We have a burden to prove today. Let's look at some case law. In the matter of the appeal of Totland Preschool Incorporated. In the matter of the appeal of Totland Preschool Incorporated, Totland, a nonprofit corporation that provided child care services to the community, appealed a decision of the County Board of Commissioners upholding the county tax assessor's denial of taxpayer application for exemption from property taxes for its new facility. Property Tax Commission reversed the decision of the board and granted the application for property tax exemption. The county then appealed. The Court of Appeals held that Totland property was wholly and exclusively used for a nonprofit charitable purpose, and thus the taxpayer was entitled to exemption from ad valorem taxation. This holding was based on the same two-step analysis that we previously referenced, and the court determined that Totland met the test for the following reasons. This is test 1. This is going to deal specifically with the wholly and exclusively used for a charitable purpose. Test 1, to determine whether the agency seeking an exemption qualifies as one of the types of agencies entitled to an exemption, the court found they qualified for the 4 following reasons. Totland is a charitable entity by the fact that it is incorporated under the North Carolina Nonprofit Corporation Act. The Charlotte Rifle and Pistol Club is incorporated under that act. Totland's bylaws establish themselves as an organization exclusively for charitable and educational purposes. That's why we talked and started with the nonprofit articles of incorporation and bylaws, because that is what they are there for. Number 3, the federal government recognized Totland as a nonprofit organization. In your packet, you will see that recognition by the IRS. Yes, we openly admit they are not a 501c3, but the only reason is because they can't be. Gun organizations are not allowed to be 501c3s. And because of that, they are a 501c4, which is the next highest possible classification that they can attain. And number 4, Totland provides services to the community at a significantly lower rate than market, as well as free services, in addition to not competing with private entities and holding itself out to make money. You just heard testimony from Mr. Grimm that they do exactly that. Now, test 2 was whether or not the agency uses the entirety of the property for nonprofit purposes. As this is a nonprofit and every single bit of what they do is nonprofit, every single thing that goes on that gun range is nonprofit. They don't do anything that is outside of their articles of incorporation or bylaws. And as such, they use it exclusively for that. Now, there was a later case, in full fairness to Mr. Scholar, an appeal of Eagles Nest Foundation, which later distinguished that market rate offerings in competition with local for-profit businesses could disqualify an entity from nonprofit exemption. They offer their services at a lower cost than the marketplace. And the only reason they're able to do that is because of the donations of their members. Because of that very reason, they qualify. Now, the last case. In the matter of the appeal of Pavilion International. In the matter of the appeal of Pavilion International, the taxpayer operated a residential treatment center and appealed to the county board in review of the assessor's decision denying application for property tax exemption. Property Tax Commission overruled the board, and the county then appealed. The court held that the center was wholly and exclusively used for charitable purposes and found that they qualified for the exemption. The finding was again based on the evidence that the offerings by the clinic were more in line with state offerings than private market rate competitors. They offer their services for free to local, state, and federal governments. I don't think there's anything more in line with that than that offering. They also offered free services in Pavilion, which these folks do, that were available to the public regardless of the ability to pay, and that their work benefited a large segment of the community, and lastly, that the donations raised by Pavilion make the charitable offerings possible. I emphasize again, the membership fees paid by these gentlemen make all of these organizational offerings possible. Without them, those things wouldn't occur. And our community would lose a wonderful organization that helps educate and teach about our Second Amendment. Now, lastly, there's an interesting article, and I have it here if you'd like to review it, from the North Carolina School of Law. And North Carolina's Nonprofit Property Tax Exemption Conundrum was the title of it, and it said that there is much confusion around this matter, which has led to research and publication of articles. Most recently, the comprehensive review of the confusion, and this is what I will say taken from the summary. The authors of this article approach the property tax conundrum from different angles. They agree on the need for greater consistency in the application of North Carolina's property tax laws. They also agree that entrepreneurial fee-generating nonprofit organizations should not be forced to pay property taxes in instances where there is a tight nexus between the fee-generating activity and the nonprofit organization's charitable, education, or religious purposes. What does that mean? Well, that means that these membership fees that they pay, they are used in tight nexus with the organization's charitable, education, or religious purpose. If they were using these donations to create lavish lifestyles where someone could go and eat or drink and do all that had nothing to do with the organization, you would be correct in denying the exemption. But that is not what happens here. Instead, this organization takes its money and takes these donations and enables this community to have a jewel for which by any individual can practice their Second Amendment rights and learn it safely and learn it in a good way. And the author supported this next test because it's instructive in this specific case. It seems reasonable to exempt property that is used for commercial activity so long as the nonprofit owner can demonstrate that the commercial activity has that substantial nexus with the exempt purposes beyond mere revenue production. And lastly, this is what I think the article stated that was the most interesting. When faced with the conundrum of nonprofits engaged in commercial activities, local tax officials need to dig in, ask questions, and determine if that activity exists solely for revenue generation or whether that activity is motivated less by revenue concerns and more for programmatic concerns. You just saw all the programs these folks offer. The fee generation by those membership fees goes to offer those programs. And if the programmatic concerns, all of which are the education, all of which offers individuals something they would never have access to otherwise, at a far less cost than anywhere else in this area, if those programmatic concerns outweigh revenue concerns, then the nonprofit should still be eligible for a religious, educational, and charitable exemption. This should be true even if the nonprofit's commercial activity competes directly with the for-profit businesses. This balanced approach satisfies both legal and policy interests. It upholds the letter and spirit of North Carolina's property tax exemptions. This is why we do this. We do this so that organizations can have the revenue to be able to offer something that would never be able to be offered by a for-profit, because no one would make money. It protects local government tax bases by not exempting commercial activities with no beneficial purpose other than revenue generation. And it encourages and protects evolving efforts by nonprofits to creatively benefit the community writ large. Thank you for your time. We hope that you'll find with us, and we stand ready for Mr. Scholar's questions.
Mr. Shaheen, hang on just 1 minute. Ray, you got any questions for Mr. Shaheen?
Yeah, I've got, you mentioned two previous cases, I guess, before the state or, one was Pavilion, it was a treatment center.
Yes, sir.
Just, what was the first one you mentioned?
Totsland. Totsland, sir. It was a preschool.
Preschool.
Yes, sir. And then Mr. Scholar has the copy. I believe I gave you those copies of those cases. Yes, sir. If you'd like to see them.
Second question I have is, you're coming before this board now for a property tax exemption for land and buildings.
Yes, sir.
Totaling 1.5 million based on your 990 tax form.
Yes, sir.
The personal property that Mr. Grimm mentioned, the county has determined that that's taxable?
Yes, sir. Well, we are here today because the way the disposition was, Mr. Grimm asked for tax exempt status for the personal property, and Mr. Scholar and I did talk about this. The lady Miss Treadaway, I believe, who gave that exemption, that was pulled back after we had spoken with Mr. Thrift about, I'm sorry, that's not right. After we had spoken with the county about the real estate portion. When we brought the real estate portion before the county, it seems there was a reversal. Mr. Scholar and I spoke about that, and that's why we're here today. And again, I don't know if you all remember, I was here before you on a late application a while back, and the reason was because we had understood that the county was going to exempt them, and we had placed the application for the property in as well. And when we were told no, we wanted to appeal that decision, and we needed to, when we filed the appeal, it was not timely. So we came in and asked for the timeliness for the application. They reviewed it, and then at that point, determined that the organization was not exempt, despite everything that we showed.
Okay, two other questions. One is this the first time that this organization has asked for an appeal?
Yes, sir.
Of the, so heretofore, they've paid taxes on the land and buildings up
Yes, sir.
to this point.
Yes, sir.
So why didn't they come before the board before now? I mean,
As I said, it's hard to get answers from a volunteer group.
Yeah, please.
I
you.
really, no one can answer me. I believe and this is just tribal knowledge from listening to other members, that many years ago, they came before and asked for an exemption and were told no and took it at face value. I was secretary for a small volunteer fire department, so I was a little bit maybe more in tune with what nonprofits are entitled to. And I looked at these things and said, if we're truly a nonprofit, and we are, we should ask for an exemption. And when it was denied, that's when we hired Mr. Sheen.
okay. So heretofore, you filed the 990 returns for all prior years? Because I know a few years ago, the IRS came after the American Legions, and I'm a veteran myself, but you filed all the returns prior to that?
Yes, I have returns going back to the 1980s. I will tell you that, again, this is hearsay, we were investigated by the IRS maybe 8 or 10 years ago, and we were clear, there was nothing found, and our tax exempt status stayed in effect. So we did have what would you call it, a tax review or a audit. They audited us. So,
One last question I have. There's a letter in here from the IRS.
yes, sir.
I think it was a recent letter in 2009, said it indicated that folks that pay you dues, those dues are not tax exempt.
Correct.
Okay.
We
that's
get
all.
lots of donations. All the furniture in our places is somebody's grandmother's who died. But you can't take, we are not, 501c4, you cannot claim a tax exemption for donating to us. If we were a C3 church or something like that, then it is.
Thanks, sir.
You're welcome.
Go ahead.
Dutch?
I think I'd like to hear from the county first before I ask him
Mark?
questions. I'm good right now. Go ahead.
I have a few.
Yes, sir.
Do you have other examples, other than a preschool, of a gun range asking for exemption?
No, sir, because we believe that this is a very new concept. And the reason it's a new concept and that hasn't been tried before, and the fact of the matter is that I think Mr. Scholar will also testify to this, there is not very much case law around this. There are very few cases that are taken this far, and I'm going to tell you the reason why is because it's hard for nonprofits to pay to take something all the way to the Court of Appeals. It's very, very hard, and most of the time it's done by folks like myself who are willing to stand up and do this for a reduced fee or no fee. It's just the way that it is. And while I would love to provide you with that, Mr. Chairman, I would absolutely love to do that. Unfortunately, I think that this specific example not being covered is only because folks have never had the opportunity or the availability to have someone argue on their behalf before. And I think that I would hate that we would open the floodgates and have folks try to do this, because I think that this organization, as a unique organization, specifically qualifies as a unique organization because of its longstanding history in the community.
All right. When, you own 2 properties.
They own 2 properties, yes, sir. 3 properties.
When these properties purchased, just the year, you remember, sir?
Our outdoor range, which is comprised of two properties, the first one, the big one, was purchased somewhere around 1960, 61. Second one was purchased 2012 from a lady who owned 5 acres that included a right-of-way for our driveway. So she wanted to sell it, and we felt it was in our best interest to buy our driveway back in 2012. In 1989, we bought the property in Matthews. It's in an industrial park by 485. That's our indoor range, and we've owned that ever since.
Okay. One other question. All right, so you took your office in February of 19. So did you appeal this ruling last year or this year?
Last year.
Last year, okay. All right. All right, thank you, gentlemen. Let's hear from the county.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Grimm, if I may indulge you a minute, ask your indulgences. Appreciate you being here today. I
My
think
pleasure.
it helps everybody understand what this club is all about and what you do. And I think that's the importance of why we're here, and the purpose of the BER being here is to determine what you do, and so they can apply your qualification for an exemption based on the facts and the information. Again, thank you for being here. To follow up on Mr. Brooks's question about the IRS letter, based on the IRS ruling or determination, donations of your members to the club are not tax deductible.
Correct.
So they are truly, are they really donations, or are they contributions to the club, but they're not tax?
Under everything that I can read, they are considered donations. We call them dues, but in the IRS ruling, I looked at a lot of things online, and they seem that dues and donations seem to be the same thing when it's a nonprofit corporation.
Okay. And for the board, that is tab 5 in your packet that the county provided. That IRS determination letter is in there. Let's talk a minute about, you talked about your charges and those kinds of things. And I think you indicated your fees were $240 a year for a member.
Correct. 120 for seniors.
Right, with some breaks for different classifications, understand, and that's typical. Do you have an initiation fee?
We do, $500.
$500 initiation fee, but that's a one-time fee.
A one-time fee.
Okay. Now, you mentioned a lot of, well, let me back up a minute. Of the participation at your range, you mentioned that it is primarily member-only use, but you do have events where others, members of the community, can come in.
Correct. Matches are open to the public. A lot of the training that I mentioned is open to the public. You don't need to be a member for that. But if you want to come up and shoot an ATA event at our trap range, you don't have to be a member. If you want to shoot in our military rifle match, you don't have to be a member.
Is there a fee for that?
There is usually what we call a match fee, and it usually covers the cost of targets, target backers, things like that. It never exceeds $20.
So, and I know that this may be difficult to do, but just as a general ballpark feeling of the use of your range, is it primarily by members or is it by non-members? Give me some feel for the use of your range,
Well,
member versus non-member.
The use of the ranges themselves are mostly by members, and they guests. You're allowed, if you're a member, we don't give you a limit on how many guests you can bring at one time. We just require that you supervise your guests. So we get a lot of guests, and the other things, educational, much of it is for our members, but everything I read off to you today is open to non-members.
Okay. And of the activities of members at your club, certainly they can participate in the educational events, and
Certainly.
you've talked about those.
Everything is open, unless it's like a Boy Scout event, then the members don't participate in that, other than supervising the boys or girls. Members wouldn't be invited to shoot at the same time the Boy Scouts are or the police are. We keep those separate.
Sure. And typically a member can also come and use the range for just
Some people
practice,
just come
or-
up and sit. Some people bring their dogs up and exercise them. We have one fella who is a state-certified tracking dog guy. So if hunters lose their prey, they call him in and he'll track it down and dispatch it humanely. And we allow them to practice in our non-range areas, which is huge. We have a big wooded area.
Right.
And they can run their dogs around in there.
But remember, got full use of the facilities. They can come anytime,
Yes, sir.
shoot on whatever range they want to shoot on.
Well, our indoor range is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and a lot of members take advantage of that. They get off after work, they go over there. Our ranges are open 8 a.m. to, depending on the time of year, 7 p.m., no later than all shooting has to stop at 8 p.m., but we're rarely open at 8.
And during those times, those ranges are monitored by just safety personnel.
Yes,
Is that
sir.
right?
Range can't be open without 2 RSOs on duty at any given time.
Okay. So of a typical member, well, I'm sure there's not a typical member, but in the general life of the club, a member spends roughly how much time in just shooting versus some type of event, sporting event or whatever?
We have so many different kinds of members. There's groups that come up. I work Thursday from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. as a range safety officer. I'm on duty. I see the same people every week with a few different people thrown in. I have a group of retired airline pilots that comes and shoots together every Thursday. We have one member, he's been in the club 50 years. He is a retired dentist. He comes every day that the range is open, and he probably shoots 10 bullets, but it's a social event for him. His other friends come up on and off. There is no average member. We get some members that only come up at hunting season to sight in their rifle. We only see them 2 or 3 times a year. Other people are very involved in the activities, the matches and things, and weekends are very busy at our facility. During the week, it's quieter.
Speaking of social events, do you have social events at your
No.
club?
We do have, once a year, we have an annual meeting, which is required. The club pays for that. It includes a dinner. We used to have it at the American Legion, but the club has gotten bigger, so we've had to move it to the college over by the airport. And no, that's about it. Once in a while, we will sponsor a lunch or something for the RSOs to show appreciation. But no, it's not like belonging to a country club where there's cotillions and dances, and we don't have any food. We have a snack machine and a soda machine at each range, but we don't have any real amenities other than ranges.
Now, see, you have provided information about the other agencies that use your range and use your facilities, and approximately the times that they use those. And we appreciate you supplying that, because I think that is helpful. Certainly, the federal air marshals and the Waxhaw PD, Sheriff's Office, those kinds of uses are public uses, and those are appreciated. The Junior Air Rifle, Appleseed Program, Boy Scouts, all those are certainly beneficial to those organizations, no doubt. And those, you do not charge for those, use of those facilities,
No,
right?
sir.
So the federal air marshals and the police departments
Free.
pay no
No.
fee at all.
They don't really cost us anything other than the use of the range. They destroy target backers and things, but they're relatively inexpensive, and we just replace them as necessary.
Okay. But I see on here where you have archery tournaments, hunter safety courses, well, rifle familiarization, handgun familiarization, shotgun safety matches. Those are your events that you sponsor?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So they're not for outside agencies per se, those are club events?
No, they are club-sponsored events, but you are welcome to come to handgun familiarization, junior air rifle, if you wanted your grandson to shoot in. Those are all open to the public.
Right. I'm trying to draw a distinction, though, between, say, the Boy Scouts and the Federal Air
Scouts.
Marshals versus the handgun familiarization.
Well, the Boy
shotgun
Scouts,
pursuit.
we do pay. because we give them ammunition, targets, expendables,
Right.
snacks, things like that, and we pick up the cost for that. Same thing with the junior air rifle. There's no cost to the participants at all. The club pays for their ammunition, et cetera.
Okay. And the times that you have listed here, is that based on your records that you have?
You mean the times
Yeah.
that they show up?
Times per year, 4 times per year, for example, for the Appleseed
Yeah,
program?
everyone that wants to shoot at our range, like, let's say you had a group, a church group or something that you wanted to teach self-defense, you would make an application to the board. Me, I get all the applications and we vet them, and we would bring it up and vote on it. You would tell us, there's a form online that you can use, and you would tell us what the event is, when you want to have it, how long it's going to take, and all the particulars of it, and we would approve it or not approve it, depending on the criteria that it met. If it was a for-profit, we have had people that want to do training for outside groups, and they want to rent our ranges. We don't allow that. It's strictly members only. We don't allow outside, we don't sell our range. We had a fellow wanted to give us a pickup truck if we would put the name of his company on there. We refused that. There's no advertising on our website. We do allow a bulletin board for members so you can sell things to each other, but we don't allow any solicitation or anything at all.
Okay. I noticed in your bylaws or the other information that you provided that you said it was open, that membership was basically open to anybody who wanted to join and pay the fees, but they do have to be approved by the board, right?
Well, they do, yes.
Okay, and they have to be an NRA member.
We do require that you be an NRA member to be a member of the club.
So if somebody decided they did not want to be an NRA member, then they could not join your club.
Probably not, yes.
Okay. I do have one other area of questions that I need to talk to you about, and that involves the 3 parcels themselves. And if you look at the material that I provided, it's right there, I think, to your right. Yep. Under the green tab in the back are the 3 parcels. And the first parcel, I think, is your outdoor gun range. And the second parcel is your indoor range.
Lebanon, yep.
Okay, and the third parcel is what appears to be a vacant piece of property.
Yep, it's our driveway.
Okay, so your driveway is exclusively on that property.
Yeah, it actually backs right up to the first property. I mean, it's right next to it. But we bought it in 2012. We had an easement for our driveway from this lady who owned the property, and when she wanted to sell it, we bought it.
Okay.
We figured that would ensure that there's no problems in the future. It's empty,
Do you have another access?
no.
Other than
No
that?
other access to
Okay.
it. There's no access to it at all. You'd have to go up our driveway and walk in.
Right. Okay, but that clarifies that, because I wasn't sure what that property was used for, and I think
It's not
that
used for
helps.
anything.
So
We have
it
a
is
great
used for the
deal of
range.
Unused property.
Okay. Does the club ever hold fundraising events?
Only for the American Legion.
Okay.
We do not host fundraising events. We allow them to host a fundraising event using our facility of turkey shoots. That's the only one I'm aware of.
Okay.
We don't do fundraising for politicians or anybody or anything like that. There's none of that. We don't allow that.
Okay. Those are all my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ray, you have any questions of the county? Let's see.
You don't have, you have an officer that's paid a salary?
No, sir. The only salaries that we pay are for, we call them trappers. They fill the shotgun traps, those are the things that throw the targets, with birds. They work, we are only open, our shotgun range is only open 4 days a week. They are paid, one guy works each day, and we pay him $15 an hour, because we couldn't get anybody at $10 an hour. We used to pay $10 an hour. And they each work 7 hours each day. So we have a total of 28 hours a week that we pay. We file taxes, pay taxes, we have workman's compensation. Those are the only people that get compensated. Everything else is volunteer.
I'm looking at your budget for 2020, 21. It's got a line item on here called Executive Officer, $13,195.
Yeah, that's, our executive officer is the guy who's in charge of the facilities. And let me see, I met with we have an audit and finance committee that does.
Be sure you're speaking into the microphone. Thank you, sir.
So you don't have to go through all of that. I'm just,
I kind of made notes of what that includes. And our executive officer is in charge of the basic maintenance facility.
But-
He does not have the biggest budget.
under 990, when you file your return, I'm going from memory, way back, the exempt organization should not be compensating any officers for their, and yet this says executive officer 13,000.
It's not a compensation to him, it's for his budget. His budget includes repairing the roads, maintaining the facilities, bulldozing the berms, things like that. That's what the
So
executive.
it's not wages.
It's not wages. There are no, the only wages are those 4 people. I have a budget in here too of several $1,000s. And that's for stamps, envelopes. We have to do a mail out every couple times a year. And those are things that I have to buy.
Okay.
A computer, things like that.
Thank you.
No salary.
Okay.
All right, Dutch?
I'd just kind of like to be clear on, it's obvious that the two parties interpret it different. And just what the core difference is.
I'll talk to you about that in just a few minutes.
Okay, okay. I don't have any further questions. That's the
Okay.
piece.
Mark?
Only question I have is for the county on this property, the 3 properties, how much, I see it's over $2 million, how much is that in taxes? I mean, or you might
Our
know. How much-
taxes are
county-
about $25,000 combined. I think we paid
Okay.
$1,900 in personal property tax. The rest is real estate tax.
Okay,
It's about 25 grand.
and if I can't, how many of y'all belong to Charlotte Rifle and Pistol? I mean, this is interesting because, I've heard some, well, we'll just say stories in the newspaper and stuff about issues over there, but other than that, I just didn't know if anybody,
Well, we have 2,000 members.
I didn't know how exclusive it was.
It's
Yeah,
not
That's a
exclusive.
good question. How many members do you have?
2,000, just under 2,000.
And
It
how many are in
fluctuates.
Union County?
I have no idea. We don't go by county. We're right on the South Carolina border. We get a lot of people from Mecklenburg, a lot of people from South Carolina. But we don't break it down by where you live. You can be, we used to allow members from out of town at a reduced rate, but we stopped doing that some time ago. It was just a pain in the neck for the 4 guys that we had.
So you're really like from South Carolina, Mecklenburg County, all around? Is it
Yeah,
within,
just a local area. A lot of people live in Monroe.
because I heard you say something about another gun place or, shooting range?
Oh,
that's
there's-
More, like hour and a half away or something?
Yeah,
It's kind of-
Uncle somebody's has a shooting range. It's like, he's got a farm and he plowed up a
Yep,
thing.
yep.
But it's not regulated, you pay him your $15 or whatever for an hour and you go in there and you shoot. So we don't think that kind of shooting is safe. Indoor ranges around here, it's more
Okay.
controlled, but still, you don't need to prove that you're
I
proficient.
just wish you would have been able to tell me, a kind of ballpark figure. If you got 2,000
We have
members, how many are in Union County? How many are, outside?
If
Just
it's
a
important.
ballpark figure.
We can provide that to
I
you,
can
sir.
get that figure if it's important. I mean,
Okay.
I maintain the roster, so I could probably just go by zip code. I will tell you, an awful lot of people live in Waxhaw, but they
Yeah.
come from the trike, the area.
Maybe you can get that information at some time. I don't have any more questions right now.
Randy,
sir.
I have one other question.
Yes, sir, Ray?
This is for the county. You're not the only shooting range in North Carolina organization. All the other organizations other than you how are they treated in the other 99 counties, or how many we got in the state? Are they exempt? And what is the Department of Revenue's position on this exemption?
Well, I can tell you, I did talk with representatives from the Department of Revenue, and it's my understanding that there is not a single other gun range that is exempt in any county in North Carolina. This would be the first. This would be a test case. They have lots of heartburn, quite frankly, with recognizing their activities as a charitable organization or an educational organization. They just seem to think that's, and
Okay.
again, this is the representative I spoke to, for what it's worth, and that's hearsay, I understand that. But it's my understanding that there are no other gun ranges that are exempt, and they don't think this organization qualifies under the statute,
Thank you, sir.
for what it's worth. And I don't mean to prejudice the board with that, but you asked a question.
No.
Would you mind formalizing that in some level and providing that?
Sure. Talking about a letter
Yes, I'd like a letter, yeah, from them.
from them?
From them.
I'll talk with them and see.
Yes, sir.
If the
Thank you.
Department of Revenue of the state doesn't recognize us, why would they grant us the exemption under Section 55A, I believe it is?
They're different standards.
No, sir, they're not.
Doesn't seem, that
No, sir.
Non-
They are not.
nonprofit seems to be nonprofit. I don't know that we can apply different standards just because it suits you.
It's different statutes.
Could you supply us with those?
Sure.
If we're not in compliance with them, I'd be happy to become in compliance with them.
When you
Point
say
of fact,
different, when you
if I
say,
may, Mr. Grimm, I'm going to address that.
excuse me, Mr. Sheen,
Yeah.
when you say a different statute, so it would be the profit or non-profitability of the company would be under one statute, and then the real estate ownership would be another statute. Is that
Yes.
what you're saying, Terry? Okay.
They're
Sir,
different
that,
statutes.
that's incorrect. I'm going to go ahead and say that's incorrect. And I'm going to say that's incorrect because of one very important reason. There is no definition of a nonprofit under Chapter 105. There isn't one. There is a definition of a nonprofit under Chapter 55A. And when you reference the Totland case, the most important ruling in the Totland case was that they determined whether a nonprofit was charitable or, in that instance, because of the fact that they were organized under Chapter 55A. Chapter 55A is the test by which Chapter 105 uses to make sure that an entity is a organized nonprofit corporation. I understand that the county would like to not do that. However, the law is the law. Chapter 55A is the standard by which a nonprofit corporation is organized in North Carolina. And it is not in the best interests of our state or our county or our community to start applying arbitrary standards to properly organized Chapter 55A nonprofits. It just isn't. Because when you do that, you start applying standards that are not fair or uniform across the board, and it's just, frankly, it's inappropriate. And I respect that the state has heartburn about it, given the current governor. I'm not surprised. But at the end of the day, they can't just say, we don't like you because what you do with your nonprofit status does not please us. That's not correct.
There are lots of nonprofits that are not recognized for property tax exemptions.
I agree, but there are very few nonprofits that have been able to show and can show the level of nonprofit activity and nexus between the nonprofit activity and the fees with which the member
And
pays.
that's the reason it depends specifically on the activities of this club and
Exactly.
how it applies to the statute for the tax exemption for property
But that is
tax.
only in determination of Chapter 105-278.7.
My point
It is
exactly.
not- and that's the thing is, when you look at the test, Section C, a charitable association or institution, Totsland, in that case, the Court of Appeals ruled that they were defined a charitable association or institution because they were properly organized under Chapter 55A. That's a ruling of the Court of Appeals. There is no other thing that distinguishes that. There is no contravention. The Supreme Court has not changed that rule. It has not made a difference. The definition of a charitable association or institution under the Totsland case is organization under Chapter 55A of this state, Mr. Scholler.
That is not the sole and single standard. Otherwise, any nonprofit would be recognized as a charitable organization.
But it's the first
For
test.
property
It's the first
tax-
test. It's
tax
the first test.
purposes.
Okay. Anyway,
Anyway, those are legal arguments.
It would seem that you're agreeing to disagree.
yeah. I know you have a presentation, Mr. Scholl. I'll let you go. I'm sorry.
Continue on, Terry.
I will, and I'll come up to the podium.
Absolutely, that'd be great.
As you can see, lawyers can disagree over, over the interpretation of these statutes. And that's the reason that you're here. And that's the reason you're the first step in this process of determining whether this organization qualifies for a property tax exemption, not whether they qualify for a nonprofit status, but whether they qualify for a property tax exemption. No question this is a good organization. They provide a great service. The benefit that they provide to its members and to the community in large, I think, is commendable. But you're here to determine whether this club meets the definition, meets the qualification for a property tax exemption under the statute, under that statute. The fact that they are a 501c4 organization, or even a 501c3 organization under the IRS, does not qualify them for the exemption. It's a factor, sure, but that alone does not qualify. The fact that they are a nonprofit is a factor, but that alone does not qualify them for the exemption. Otherwise, lots of nonprofits recognized under North Carolina statute as a nonprofit would qualify for the exemption, but they don't. Simple fact is you have to meet that test under 105, 120, 278.7 in this tab 1 in your folder there. And you can look at it. Basically, that statute says to qualify for the ad valorem tax exemption, you have to meet a two-part test. It has to be ownership, owned by a nonprofit for educational, scientific, literary, or charitable purpose. Nonprofit is one of the things I think that's required, but that is not the sole test. And that's what they're trying to leverage the fact that they're recognized as a nonprofit, which is typically a charitable organization. They're trying to leverage that to mean because of that, they're automatically apply or qualify for the exemption. That's not true. That's just one of the aspects that they have to meet. But they also have to show that they are wholly and exclusively using this property for a educational, scientific, literary, or charitable purpose, wholly and exclusively. No other use. Now, there are lots of fights and lots of disagreements over that, even among the courts and the courts of appeals about what that means. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But the two-part test is it has to be owned by an organization that's recognized as a nonprofit for scientific, educational, literary, and charitable purpose. Then they also have to use it wholly and exclusively for that purpose. So here we've got the Charlotte Rifle and Pistol Club, which is a good organization, no question about that. It is a private, members-only club. They do recognize outside events. They do have open their ranges up for non-club members to come and use them for a fee. But it's primarily for private members, a private gun club. So the question in my mind is, do they meet the qualifications, the criteria for either, in my mind, either an educational use or a charitable purpose? And that's kind of where all this, I think, comes down to. And you've heard a lot of discussion from Mr. Sheehan about all these other factors that come in, but I think those are really the two that need to be focused on. Is it an educational purpose or is it a charitable purpose? Or is it used for some other purpose? And if it's used for some other purpose, then does it qualify under the statute? And you've heard him read the definition of a charitable purpose in the statute. That's subsection F. And I just asked, in your mind, does the operation of a private gun range, private gun club for its members, even allowing other agencies, outside agencies, to come in and use the range for free, and that's admirable on their part, does that qualify as a charitable purpose? Think of the kind of organizations that you think of as being charitable organizations. Does this fit? Does this qualify as a charitable purpose? Are they using the range for a charity, for charitable use? Does it provide a humane purpose or philanthropic purpose under the definition? In my mind, I'm not sure it meets that criteria. But also, the other criteria is, are they using the property for an educational purpose? And educational basically means education, training people, and they're holding classes here. They're allowing individuals to form additional skills, and I do think that there are uses of the property that are educational, the training aspects and the skill development aspects, and all those are certainly in educational nature, and that would qualify. But you've also heard testimony about the other uses of the property. Members can go at will and simply just use the range for their own shooting purposes. Yeah, that may be some element of developing the skills of firearm and firearm use and that sort of thing, but is that actually training? Is that educational in and of itself? Or are they simply going to use the facilities recreationally? Recreational shooting. And I tried to get Mr. Grimm to give us an idea how much the property was used for actual class time, training time, versus simple recreational use. And I know that's hard to do. That's difficult to do. But I think there's no question that the property is used for recreational purposes. Guys come there to shoot. They shoot together. They socialize together. They are together. And that's not part of their educational purpose. And you ask yourself, when a member joins the club, is he joining the club because he can participate in these educational activities, the training and the other things that go on there, certainly a factor. But is he joining the club so he'll have access to a shooting range pretty much whenever he wants to go shoot recreationally? If it's primarily to go shoot recreationally, then does it meet the test of wholly and exclusively used for educational purposes under the statute? And I think you need to look at, there are a couple of cases, and I didn't provide you a copy of them, but because I can get you a copy if you want it, but one is one that Mr. Shaheen mentioned, and that's the Eagles Nest Foundation case. And in that case, it was a summer camp that was operated in the summertime for boys. They had classes and events and things like that for boys in the summer. And they tried to qualify as educational. And the court basically held that no, it was not educational use, that the property was also used for other activities like hiking and swimming and rock climbing and various other activities, which it deemed recreational. And the court determined that under that case, that the property, although education was an aspect of it, was not wholly exclusively used for educational purposes because it was primarily for recreation. Another case is Chapel Hill Daycare case, and I didn't give you a copy of that. Totslin is an interesting case, and I think that certainly is, like Mr. Shaheen has pointed out to you, that's the holding in the Totslin case, a daycare case. I disagree with him that the Totslin case turned exclusively on whether they were a nonprofit organization or not, because I don't think that's the reading of the case, not my reading of the case anyway. But in the Chapel Hill Daycare case, Chapel Hill Daycare was available and used for daycare purposes for kids, and they held classes. They had classes for kids They had instructors, some of them with master's degrees would come in and teach, and they did student evaluations and things like that, like you would normally expect in the school. And the court looked at that case and said, yeah, there's an educational component to what they're doing, but their primary purpose was custodial, taking care of kids who are at daycare. They did not find that the educational component was totally and exclusively, wholly and exclusively the purpose of the daycare. So they ruled against them. So here, I just think you need to think about what they're asking you to do. And simply because they're a nonprofit doesn't necessarily qualify them as for the exemption for property tax purposes. Again, under the statute that we're looking at here, specifically, you have to find they're a nonprofit for educational, scientific, literary, or charitable purpose. But you also have to find that it's wholly and exclusively used for that purpose. And here, it's two purposes I would focus on, would be education and charitable purpose. Are they used exclusively and wholly for that purpose? I contend no, that their members join that club primarily for recreational purposes and not simply because they can go and participate in a class. It's not educational. But it's your decision. That's the reason you're here, and we appreciate you listening to us.
Mr. Solar, this may be a poor example, but I'm on, thinking about it. So let's use Rolling Hills Country Club and let's use Myers Park Country Club. Do they pay property taxes?
Yes.
As far as I know, both of those country clubs hold events for, and I know the one here in Monroe, for the Kiwanis Club, the Rotary Club, the Turning Point Women's Shelter. So they hold events just like they do for the American Legion, where that particular fund, they make money for that particular nonprofit.
Right.
But in those instances, both those country clubs, which are nonprofits, I'm assuming, because they have paid employees, somewhat like the gun club does, but they pay real estate taxes.
Yes.
All right, thank you. You have any questions of Mr. Scholler? Ray?
Just got one.
Sure.
Your argument in a nutshell is whether or not it's under the statute 105-278-7 is exclusively and wholly used for educational purposes. And I'm looking at this gun club has over almost $600,000 in membership fees or dues, whatever you want to call it. If you were to break that down as a percentage of how much of that, which I think you were alluding to, how much of that is used for education as far as their gun educational programs that they do during the year, you may be implying that may be 10% or 20% only, and the rest of that money is people paying dues to come in there weekly to shoot and practice and so on, non-educational. Is that where you're coming from?
On the educational side of it, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's kind of where I'm coming from. It is primarily used for recreational purposes.
That's all I have.
Mr. Artisan?
I've got all the dots connected, I think, now.
Okay. Mr. Ashcraft?
I'm good.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
Mr. Sheen, if you give me 2 minutes break, or I'm not going to be able to pay attention to you.
Thank you there, Hancock. Am I allowed to leave to go to the restroom right now?
Yes.
Make it quick.
very happy to y'all do whatever you need. So I'm gonna start with Mr. Scholar's contention under the IRS ruling, and the non-exemption issue. There is no requirement that an organization either be a 501c3, a 501c4, or any of that. It merely needs to be recognized to be tax exempt. Again, these folks would be a 501c3 if they could, but they're not. They're not allowed to be one. So that situation itself handles that. And again, the Totslin case was very clear that as long as they're recognized by the federal government, they're tax exempt. Now let's talk about this case. Let's talk about this Eagles Nest case, which I actually do have here. I'm gonna contend that, Mr. Scholar, you said that the educational purposes for which they were ruled under this case was applicable in this instance. I'm going to say that it's not, and here's why. If you read the case and you look within the case, they ruled against the educational purpose for an application under 105-278.4, not .7, correct? And we are applying today under 105-278.7. So that case would be inapplicable to this one. Correct? No? Okay. Well, Your Honor, I can show you all this case, and you can read it if you like. But they very clearly ruled that that standard holds to a different type of exemption. Now, there is a 105-278.4 that is an educational exemption. But here is why it doesn't apply in this instance. Because that section was designed for educational buildings, universities, schools, folks like that. To apply that level of standard to this organization would be inequitable, which is why they applied under 105-278.7, which I'll return to the Eagles Nest case, which I cited in my brief. The standard by which they failed was because they competed directly in the marketplace. They competed at the same level and tried to make the same money as the marketplace. In this instance, this organization does not. We have already discussed about how this organization charges less than the marketplace and does so at a cost to itself. And furthermore, let's talk about this membership stuff. I really want to have a conversation about that. If we were to apply Mr. Scholar's standard for membership, and Mr. Brooks, if we were to apply that standard, then the YMCA would not qualify as a tax-exempt organization because it is a private organization that is used for recreational purposes, that is used and paid for by members. If you're not a member at the Y, you can't go. So if we're going to let the YMCA and the YWCA use this statute to claim tax-exempt status, but we're not going to allow the type of recreation that occurs under the Second Amendment, where are we? That is inequitable. And to simply use the membership fees that these folks generously give every year to provide a facility that would not otherwise be in existence, I think that's inequitable. And I think that most others would too. And at the end of the day, there is no necessary test by which they have to either apply for donations from the general public or get donations from members. If they didn't have memberships and they were just a general open to the public and they had folks that gave money, how would that be any different than in having membership? You've already heard that they're open to the public, that no one is denied membership. Again, I draw a correlation to the YMCA. We all take benefit from that organization. We all take opportunities for recreation and education and learning from that organization. Why would a gun club modeled on that same organization not be given the same benefit as that organization? Now, we talked about the educational aspect. Let me ask you this question. If you don't practice your shooting, do you get better? Or do you get worse? I would contend you get worse. And I would contend that the constant practice is educational. And I would contend, Mr. Brooks, that you have to practice it, just like we practice law, Mr. Scholar, and just like you all practice your professions. If you don't get better at it, you'll lose it. And this facility offers an opportunity for individuals, as you heard Mr. Grimm say, to the general public at a reduced cost than the marketplace, satisfying the test within Eagles Nest, which refutes Mr. Scholar's position. The Court of Appeals has been very clear on this. Organizations need to show that they are being used for educational or charitable purposes under 105-278.7. And if you rule against this organization and decide against this organization, you need to think about the message that that sends. That in teaching and learning and passing on the knowledge of the Second Amendment and proper, safe gun use, that our government doesn't support that? You're asking for, technically what we're here doing, let's break it down to real simple. We're asking for $25,000 a year in donations from the county to support the uses of this organization. I think this county can handle that. And I think this county is strong enough, having come from around here, that we can deal with $25,000 to an organization that is not anywhere near here and help preserve this organization. I ask you to please today find for these folks, because there is no organization like this. They have paid taxes dutifully since 1917. And I'll provide whatever you need, and they will do whatever it is you require. But we must make sure that the message sent with this today, in my opinion, is one that is right. Proper education and practice of the Second Amendment must be preserved. Thank you.
Are there other gun clubs, and I'll be a question for both of you, but like this one, that has the educational programs that your gun club does?
Not nearby, no. I'm not real familiar with other gun clubs in North Carolina. Mostly we have commercial ranges in this area.
Mm-hmm.
There is the Mecklenburg Wildlife Club, which is a shooting club up near Lake Norman. I've never been there. I believe their membership is closed. I don't think they're accepting new members, so I really can't get any information about that. But there's really nobody in this area. That's what, I'll be honest, that's why we have 2,000 members. 15 years ago, we had 600 members. But as the area has built up, people need a place to shoot. And if you want to shoot, we offer you a lot for a little.
Ray, you have any questions? Dutch?
I don't.
Mark? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Let me clarify one point, and
Yes, sir.
don't want to rebut what Mr. Sheehan said, but there is a statute, 105-278.6, does specifically declare that the YMCA is a charitable organization. So they're specifically named in statute as being charitable. Yep.
And that's
Just
fine,
clarification.
which means that the statute, that further supports my point, Mr. Scholar, that the state of North Carolina has taken these types of organizations and written it into statute to support them. And even though there's not a statute for this, they've clearly made sure that those types of uses, which is a mirror use to this use, is tax exempt. So again, I would say that your point bolsters the argument that these folks deserve tax exempt status.
Yes, sir. Stand up if you don't mind and speak to the mic.
I would just like to remind you that the state has accepted us as non-taxable as far as sales tax goes. There are a couple of things like Duke Electric that we have to request the money back, but for all intents and purposes, we don't pay sales tax. So the board of whoever has given us that.
What do you sell?
Well,
I mean,
every round that we charge for people at the shotgun range, we don't make any money on it, but we still have to pay sales tax on it because we buy those targets.
So it's off the targets, is what you're saying?
The things that, if we go to buy 100 pounds of whatever at Lowe's, we don't pay sales tax.
Oh.
That kind of thing. We have a sales tax exemption.
Okay.
That would just bring, your ruling today for them would bring you in line with the state ruling on that. Thank you.
All right.
Typically speaking, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
sales tax, having worked with Department of Revenue, sales tax and income tax are two different categories. Machinery Act related to property tax, and there's case law that is specifically state this, I don't know the case it's quoted in, but the statutes for property tax are strictly construed in favor of taxation, not exemption. Sales tax exemptions and income tax exemptions fall more under those nonprofits. Just because you're exempt from state or federal income tax does not make you exempt from property tax.
Yes, but it does show support for the exemption.
That's a different issue.
No, it's not. It does, so
Agree, disagree.
but going back to the Totland case, we're gonna go back to the Totland case. The Totland case continued to point to, if the state says they are, if the federal government says they are, if the State Department of Revenue gives them a sales tax exemption, if it walks like a duck, and it talks like a duck, and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck.
All right.
I've got one more, just, and I may be overthinking this a little bit on what Mr. Graham mentioned, this is really to the county. When he mentioned, and I'm just trying to think, is there, with the exclusiveness piece of it, when, for their members, they're required to be a member of the NRA, did I understand that correctly?
That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, is there any stance from the county on that piece, or has it, the way it's interpreted in the statutes or anything?
Not really.
Okay,
No.
okay.
All right. Do I hear a recommendation of what your thoughts are?
It's been very interesting to hear more about this thing. And you really did a great job.
Thank you.
And for the county, I understand where you're coming from as far as needing more, we'll just say, discussion, agreeing on what you want to agree on. But in my case, I make a motion that we keep it as the county has it. Not
Here.
nonprofit.
Do I hear a second? Now, when your recommendation, leave it as it is.
Leave it as it
The real
is.
estate is taxable.
Correct.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it. We'll have some discussion.
Yeah, please.
I just still feel like there's a lot of recreational use.
Mm.
Is kind of where I'm coming from with it. I mean, to Ray's point, I mean, we can't really point out, and it doesn't, to me, it might not really matter by the way the statute's written on what percentage it is, but I think it's obvious to us as a board that a fair amount of it, I think, would be recreational use. I mean, they're a great group. There's a charitable component to it. I recognize that piece, but there's, to me, a recreational use by the members. to it. That's kind of how I view it.
I do too.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, Ray. Advance, excuse me.
The taxability goes to both real and personal property. It's you're either all exempt or you're all taxable. So the discussion earlier about personal property, initially was told it was exempt. That was an error. Staff had not reviewed that. And so them being taxable is for both real and personal. It's not just real or personal. It's real and personal.
So is the $25,000 I heard, is that real and personal tax, or is it,
Yes.
that's total? Wow.
Yes.
Okay. All right, any other questions before we vote? Okay, all in favor? Aye. All against? All right, gentlemen, thank you very much.
Go.
Thanks, sir.
Notice, we'll be appealing. Thank you all very much for your time.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
nice meeting you.
It's nice to meet you too, sir.
Keep that, recycle.
I just can't. I don't care about Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. Whatever. Oh, do we need to make a motion to adjourn?
That's right.
Ray, get back.
We could,
Ray's get ready to leave.
we could be here all day. Do I hear, I'm sorry, gentlemen, do I hear a motion that we adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?